Why was she the last to arrive at the briefing? The room smelled of stale coffee and fear, two things she had learned to recognize early in her career. She didn't need the maps, the charts, the words flowing from the commander's mouth, though they spoke of strategy, of danger, of impossible odds. She needed the silence before the storm, the pause when everyone else was still settling, fumbling with laptops and papers, pretending to understand the stakes. She stood at the doorway, her pack slung heavy on one shoulder, and felt the weight of unseen eyes, the judgment unspoken, waiting for her to prove something she had already proven 100 times over, in 100 silent ways. She pulled her gloves off, letting the air brush against her fingers, tracing the scars and calluses like a reminder. Every mark told a story, every burn or abrasion a choice she had made. Choices that had cost her sleep, her comfort, her nights when the world seemed a little kinder elsewhere. They didn't see that. They didn't see the long hours alone, the endless simulations, the moments she had spent lying awake in a cot, staring at a cracked ceiling, asking herself if she was enough. The briefing began. Maps lit the screens with glowing lines she could trace in her mind with her eyes closed. Routes, checkpoints, hostile zones, numbers, probabilities, risk assessments. But she wasn't listening to the numbers. She was listening to the silence beneath them, the things that numbers couldn't capture. The sharp pause between heartbeats when a shadow moves where it shouldn't. The faintest click that might be a trap. She imagined herself moving through that terrain, not just surviving but seeing, always calculating, always ready. A young officer spoke up nervously, almost flinching as if afraid she might contradict him. She didn't. She let him finish. She had learned long ago that patience was a weapon, sharper than any gun in her hands. And then the question arrived. A question no one else had asked, one she had asked herself every night. What will I leave behind if I fail? Her heart didn't skip, not outwardly, but inwardly it twisted. She had a mission, yes, but she had more than that. She had a promise. A promise made years ago in a small room she could barely remember. A promise that someone had looked at her with eyes full of trust and said, "Bring them back." And she had nodded silently because words were too weak for that weight. The room felt smaller than it was. Voices hummed, orders given and repeated, but her mind traced the shadows beyond the walls, imagining the open terrain, the wind cutting against her face, the dust beneath her boots. She was ready, and yet she was. It wasn't bravery she felt. It was focus. It was responsibility. It was the ache of knowing how far she could be pushed before she broke. "Lieutenant Marks," the commander's voice broke through the fog of thought, sharp, exacting, like a blade through silk. She nodded. "Yes, sir." "You're leading the forward recon. Sniper cover, eyes on point Charlie, no deviations, understood." Understood. She had memorized the words before the meeting even started, but she added a silent thought to the universe. Understood, yes, but I'll do more than survive. The young officer glanced at her then, the way civilians glance at soldiers in documentaries. Awed, uncertain, afraid. She let him think what he wanted. He had no idea the nights she had spent alone, tracing enemy lines, imagining their moves before they even knew themselves. No idea the quiet ferocity she carried in her chest. The mission details spread across the table like a map of blood and fire. Supply lines, enemy patrols, civilian zones. They talked about probabilities, collateral damage, extraction windows. She listened, but she saw beyond the numbers. She saw the humans, the scared ones hiding in basements, the exhausted soldiers praying the night would end. She could feel them all, a faint echo inside her, pulling at her focus, sharpening her resolve. She left the room last, carrying nothing but her pack and the weight of everything she couldn't say aloud. Outside, the sun cut a path across the tarmac, glinting off helicopters and armored vehicles. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of fuel and iron, and she inhaled it deeply as if tasting danger itself. She liked it. She needed it. It reminded her she was alive. The helicopter ride to the forward base was quiet, too quiet. She liked quiet, but this quiet was different, tense, weighted. Every eye in the cabin was hidden behind sunglasses or hardened gazes, but she felt their doubts, their hesitations, and she let it be. She had learned to carry not just her own doubts, but the doubts of everyone around her and still move forward. Her mind wandered to the first time she had faced a choice like this, not with guns or maps, but with the rawness of life and death. She was younger then, inexperienced, but the lesson had been brutal and clear. Courage wasn't a roar. It was a whisper in the dark that told you to move, even when the world screamed at you to freeze. She could still remember the sound of her own heartbeat in that moment, a rhythm she had never forgotten. Landing was smoother than expected, but the terrain was less forgiving. Dust rose in ribbons from the rotors, and she could see the rocky hills ahead, silent, brooding, filled with unseen eyes. Every step would be measured, every breath counted. She ran her fingers over the barrel of her rifle, tracing the cold metal, feeling the weight like an extension of her own body. The sniper's role was simple in words, impossible in reality. See, aim, decide, and wait. She had spent years perfecting the waiting, the silence, the patience that could decide a life in a heartbeat. The base itself was a skeleton of tents and armored vehicles, buzzing with anxious energy. Soldiers moved with efficiency, but their eyes betrayed fear. Some hid behind cigarettes, others behind routine, but she saw all of them. She understood them. And she carried a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, just a solid weight in her chest. We are here, and we will see this through. Her spot was a ridge overlooking the valley. She moved alone, naturally, as if she belonged to the shadows themselves. The wind tugged at her uniform, the sun seared her back, and every sound, the distant hum of a convoy, a bird's cry, the faintest whisper of movement, was a signal, a clue, a warning. She felt a twinge of anxiety, not fear, not yet, but awareness, and it sharpened her senses. She reached the perch and took in the valley below. It was beautiful in a brutal way. Jagged rocks, sparse trees, a river cutting silver through the dirt. And somewhere in that expanse, danger waited, patient and precise. She adjusted her scope, calibrating for distance, wind, elevation. Every detail mattered. Every decision was life or death, hers or someone else. A voice crackled over the radio, breaking the stillness. Eyes on target. Yes, she replied, calm, even as her chest tightened. Eyes on point, Charlie. The silence returned, thicker now. She scanned, every motion calculated, and then she saw it. Movement. A flash of uniform, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Her finger tightened on the trigger. She hesitated, not out of fear, but because she remembered the faces she carried in her mind. The innocents, the children, the exhausted soldiers, the promises she had made. One wrong move and all those lives could unravel. Hours passed. She counted them not by the clock, but by breaths, by heartbeats, by the faint rustle of leaves. And then she saw it again, closer this time. A squad moving with precision, unaware of the eyes above. She made her calculations, adjusted for wind, angle, distance. And as she exhaled slowly, a strange peace settled over her. This was her world, not glamorous, not loud, not celebrated, but necessary. She had trained for this, waited for this. And despite everything, the fatigue, the anxiety, the weight of responsibility, she was ready. She was alone, but she was never lonely. She had the mission. She had the memory of promises. She had the quiet determination that could carve light into the darkest valley. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon with gold and crimson, she whispered to herself, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." And in that moment, she wasn't just a soldier, a sniper, a lieutenant. She was a force of will, a shadow in the light, a hope that refused to be extinguished. Why did the radio go silent just when everything seemed under control? She froze mid-breath, scanning the valley below with hawk-like precision. The wind whispered across the ridge, carrying the faint scent of scorched earth from some distant skirmish, and her stomach tightened. Silence in a war zone was never empty. It was full of questions, of unseen threats, of moments before chaos. She had learned long ago that silence could be louder than gunfire. Her fingers flexed around the rifle, the cold metal a small comfort. She could feel the hum of her own heartbeat, steady but with an edge that made her muscles tense. She tried to pinpoint the source of the blackout, but there was nothing, only static, then nothing. Communications down, extraction delayed, eyes on target. She repeated the mantra silently, a rhythm to anchor herself. The squad below moved as expected, but something was off. Too synchronized, too precise, too quiet. Her mind raced, running through possibilities, probabilities, mistakes. She had been here before, on the edge of calm and chaos, where a single misjudgment could cost lives. Her chest ached, not with fear, but with responsibility. Every human down there was a life she could influence. She couldn't afford a mistake. She remembered the first mission where she had been truly tested. A child, no older than 10, had been in the crossfire. She had hesitated, letting instinct override orders, and had saved the boy. Her superiors had frowned. They didn't understand. But she did. And she carried that choice in her chest like a scar she was proud of. The memory gave her strength now, a quiet reminder that sometimes morality weighed heavier than strategy. Movement caught her eye, smoke rising from a distant ridge, subtle, almost imperceptible. She squinted through her scope, adjusting for distance, wind, and elevation. The squad below hadn't noticed. Maybe they never would, but she did. Her pulse quickened, a mixture of anxiety and clarity. She didn't move, didn't breathe too heavily. She just watched and waited. The sun was relentless overhead, and sweat traced lines along her neck. Her uniform clung uncomfortably, but she barely noticed. She was a shadow, a ghost on this ridge, blending with the rocks and dust. Every motion calculated, every decision deliberate. And yet beneath it all there was a question she couldn't silence. Am I enough for this? She had carried herself through worse, had faced death and loss, and had survived. But this unknown, shifting storm felt different. A voice finally crackled through the static, weak but human. "Marks, you copy," she exhaled, relief mixing with caution. "Copy, status." Situation changed, coordinates shifted, ETA uncertain, watch your 6, and then silence again. She cursed under her breath, not at them but at the universe, at the chaos of war that never followed rules, at the cruel irony of being prepared for everything except what she couldn't control. But there was no time to dwell. She adjusted her position slightly, scanning the horizon, noticing details she had missed before, a rock out of place, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, a faint movement among the shrubs. Every second mattered. Every breath counted. Her thoughts drifted to home, or rather what she remembered of it. A small town, quiet streets, the smell of rain-soaked asphalt. Laughter she could almost hear if she closed her eyes. But that world belonged to someone else now, to a version of her that had never carried the weight of lives in her hands. She had left that girl behind intentionally because survival required more than nostalgia. It required focus. It required sacrifice. And yet sometimes, late at night, memories slipped in uninvited, soft as a whisper. A sudden movement in the valley snapped her attention back to the present. Not the squad, not civilian, something else. She adjusted her scope, heart tightening in recognition. Enemy patrol. Small, deliberate, moving toward the extraction point faster than anticipated. Her mind raced, calculating trajectories, wind, time. Her finger hovered near the trigger, not yet deciding, not yet committing. Every shot she took was a statement, a moral decision. And she had promised herself she wouldn't waste that responsibility. Minutes stretched into eternity. She counted them by heartbeats, by the shifting shadow of the sun across the terrain. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she barely flinched. She had learned to endure pain, to ignore the body when the mind demanded vigilance. Her focus was a laser slicing through the chaos. And yet beneath that focus there was a quiet ache, a longing she didn't allow herself to name, for safety, for certainty, for a moment when she didn't have to bear the burden alone. She remembered her mentor, a veteran sniper who had taught her the art of patience. "You see the world not as it is, but as it moves," he had said. She repeated the words in her head, feeling them anchor her. It wasn't just technique, it was philosophy. War wasn't about bullets or bodies. It was about awareness, about understanding that every choice ripples outward. She adjusted her rifle. The patrol was closer now, unaware of the shadow above. Her mind calculated, accounting for wind, angle, and the moral weight of each potential shot. She didn't hesitate because she wanted to kill. She hesitated because she wanted to protect. Protect the squad, protect the civilians, protect the memory of everyone she had ever sworn to defend. And then a sound she hadn't anticipated, a cry sudden and human piercing through the valley. Her stomach twisted. Not a soldier's cry, but a child's. Somewhere in the chaos, someone innocent had been caught. Her heart thundered, but her hands were steady. She tracked the patrol, eyes narrowing. She couldn't save everyone, but she could save some. She would. Time seemed to stretch, compress, bend. Every second was a lifetime. She adjusted her aim, holding her breath, her mind a fortress of calm amidst the storm. And then she acted, not with bravado, but with precision, with purpose. The shot rang out, muffled by distance, and one enemy went down. The patrol hesitated, confused, and that hesitation was all she needed. She moved, still unseen, still calculating. Another shot, another decision, another life changed. And with each action, a part of her released the tension she had been holding, a small victory in a world that offered few. But victory was hollow. She knew it. Every life taken, every choice made, weighed on her like stones in a backpack she couldn't set down. She found a moment of stillness on the ridge, exhaling, feeling the sun warm her back. She allowed herself a small reflection. I am alone, yet I am not lonely. I carry more than weapons. I carry promises. The quiet ache returned, a reminder that humanity wasn't something she could leave behind even in the harshest war zones. She had learned that courage without conscience was meaningless. A faint radio signal returned, crackling weakly through the static. Marks, status. Patrol neutralized, area secured, awaiting extraction. Understood, stand by for pickup, you did well. She didn't respond immediately, not with words. She let the wind carry her thoughts, the valley absorb her silence. Words felt cheap, actions spoke louder. And in that stillness she realized something essential. Hope wasn't just about survival. Hope was about choosing to act, to persist, to carve light even in darkness. Her gaze swept the valley again. Shadows shifted, the sun began its descent, and the mission wasn't over. Not yet. But for a fleeting moment she allowed herself pride, not the loud, brash kind, but the quiet satisfaction that she had honored the weight she carried. She was still standing, still vigilant, still resolute. A soldier passed below, looking up at her with a mix of awe and relief. She returned a small nod, human acknowledgement without fanfare. She didn't need praise. She didn't seek it. The nod was enough. Mutual recognition between people who understood the cost of choices in silence. As dusk began to settle, painting the horizon with muted gold and bruised purple, she whispered again, softly, almost to herself. Sometimes, courage is not the absence of fear, but the act of moving forward despite it. And in that whispered moment, alone on a ridge overlooking a dangerous, unpredictable valley, she understood something fundamental. Strength wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was steady. It was the resolve to persist when everything inside urged retreat. She had chosen to persist. And that choice, she realized, was enough for now. Why did she feel the weight of eyes she couldn't see? The valley below seemed calm now, deceptively serene, but her instincts told her otherwise. She crouched behind the ridge, rifle resting lightly against her shoulder, scanning, waiting. Every leaf, every pebble, every shimmer of movement mattered. The air was thick with anticipation, almost tangible, pressing against her skin like a living thing. She remembered the first time she had been truly tested, not with bullets, not with orders, but with trust. A mentor, a figure she had admired silently, had told her, "You carry more than a mission. You carry lives, choices, and consequences. Never forget that." She had nodded then, young, untested, believing the weight was temporary. She had been wrong. The weight never left. It became part of her, molding her resolve, sharpening her awareness, and defining her very existence. The static on her radio snapped back to life, and a hesitant voice broke through, cautious yet tinged with worry. "Marks, reports indicate a potential enemy reinforcement approaching from the North Ridge. ETA 10 minutes. 10 minutes. That wasn't much, but it was enough. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, letting her muscles remember their training. Every movement she made had been drilled into her, practiced until instinct took over. But instinct alone wasn't enough. She had to see, to anticipate, to feel. She shifted her position slightly, settling into the natural contours of the ridge, letting the shadows embrace her. Her mind wandered briefly, a dangerous act in her profession. She thought of her family, or rather, the fragments of a family she had left behind. She had grown up with a father who never praised, a mother who feared for her every heartbeat. They didn't understand why she chose this life, why she embraced danger instead of avoiding it, and maybe she didn't understand either. She only knew that in this life, in this storm of smoke and fear and uncertainty, she had found a version of herself she couldn't find anywhere else. A version capable of resilience, precision, and silence. The distant hum of vehicles stirred her attention. The northern ridge wasn't silent. Not anymore. A convoy or maybe just a scout unit was moving fast, the dirt rising in miniature clouds in the fading sunlight. She adjusted her scope, tracking each movement with painstaking detail. Her stomach twisted slightly, not with fear but with the weight of responsibility. Every shot she took, every decision she made, rippled far beyond her perception. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a fulcrum, balancing lives on a knife's edge. She saw a flash of motion, too quick, too precise. Enemy scouts had detected the squad's presence. Panic flared in her chest, brief but sharp. She could feel the squad below, unaware of the exact danger creeping closer. She inhaled slowly, centering herself, feeling the ridge beneath her like a partner. Every heartbeat measured, every breath deliberate. I am not alone. I am part of a story larger than myself. Her finger hovered near the trigger. Not yet. Patience was as much a weapon as the rifle itself. She recalled the lessons learned in her first years as a sniper. The shot you don't take often matters more than the one you do. The words echoed, almost like a mantra, guiding her as she assessed the unfolding situation. And then came a sound that froze her blood, a cry frantic and human rising from the valley below. A civilian, a mother dragging a child by the hand, moving unknowingly into the path of the approaching enemy. Her chest tightened. She hadn't anticipated this. She couldn't ignore it. She had a choice, and every choice carried consequence. Her mind raced. The angle was tricky, the risk high. Any miscalculation could harm the innocent or alert the enemy to her position. Yet the hesitation she felt was nothing compared to the instinctual clarity that followed. Do what must be done. Protect what you can. She exhaled, adjusted the rifle slightly, and calculated. Wind, distance, trajectory. Everything. The shot was precise, neutralizing the threat to the squad while keeping the civilians unharmed. The mother didn't even realize what had happened, still clutching her child and moving on, oblivious to the bullets that had altered the course of their danger. She lowered her rifle, letting the tension in her shoulders ebb slightly. A small victory, perhaps, but enough to remind her why she endured this chaos. It was never about heroics. It was about choices. Quiet, deliberate, moral choices that shaped lives in ways most would never witness. Her radio crackled again, bringing news that sent a shiver down her spine. Marks, Northern Ridge compromised. Extraction delayed indefinitely. Command orders, maintain position, await further instructions. Indefinitely. The word hung heavy in the air, heavier than any rifle, heavier than any armor. She exhaled again, steadying herself. She had been trained for this, long waits, uncertainty, isolation. But training didn't erase the loneliness of it, the anxiety, the gnawing awareness that she could be outnumbered at any moment. Her gaze swept the horizon, searching for anomalies, threats, anything out of place. The valley had transformed into a chessboard, each shadow a potential player, each sound a warning. She felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that failure wasn't an option. Not for her. Not for the lives she carried silently in her chest. Hours passed. The light shifted, painting the rocky ridges in shades of gold and crimson before slipping into a deep, bruised purple. The enemy hadn't advanced further yet, but her body was tiring. Her mind was alert, but fatigue nipped at the edges, whispering doubts. She ignored it, focusing on the rhythm of her own heartbeat, the minute sounds of the environment. Every sound a clue, every shadow a story. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her team. They were young, inexperienced, full of questions they couldn't voice, fears they couldn't admit. And yet they moved with courage she sometimes doubted in herself. She felt pride, not loud or boastful, but quiet, grounding. She was part of a larger story, yes, but she also shaped it. Each nod, each signal, each protective shot was part of a silent dialogue of trust. A sudden rustle in the brush caught her attention. Enemy patrol, animal, she froze, analyzing. The rustle persisted, deliberate, cautious. She narrowed her eyes, and then movement, a figure low to the ground moving toward her ridge. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't anyone she had expected. Her chest tightened. Anxiety surged, not panic but alertness. She raised the rifle slowly, not yet committing, observing. The figure paused, looking around as if sensing her presence, and then she recognized the movement, the silhouette, the way it carried itself. Memories she hadn't thought about in years surged unexpectedly. A familiar rhythm of motion, a precision honed in countless simulations, countless missions. The figure was skilled, too skilled to be a casual threat. "Who is it?" she whispered, heart tightening. The figure dropped behind a rock, then peeked again. She could see it now, a woman, clearly trained, tactical gear catching the last light of dusk. Not part of her squad, not part of the enemy, at least not conventionally. Questions spiraled, confusion mixing with the adrenaline already surging through her veins. She considered her options: approach, observe, communicate. She weighed the risks, every calculation a potential turning point. Her mind flicked back to all the times she had been tested, not by enemies but by situations that required moral clarity, tactical patience, and instinct. Every choice had consequences. Every hesitation could tip the balance. And then a fleeting moment of understanding. The figure mirrored her movements, skilled, cautious, deliberate, not reckless, not careless, and yet unknown. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension ebb slightly, though her heart still pounded. She wasn't just a soldier, not just a sniper, not just a guardian. She was an observer of human nature, a judge of intention, a witness to choices made in silence. And this woman, this unknown, skilled, deliberate presence, was a new equation she had to solve alone. As darkness settled over the valley, painting it in shadows and muted light, she whispered again, softly, almost to herself. Sometimes, understanding comes not from answers, but from patience. And patience can be the most dangerous weapon of all. She settled in for the night, the ridge her lone sanctuary. Every sound now, wind, distant vehicle hum, rustling leaves, was a signal, a warning, a story. She watched, she waited, she prepared. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. And somewhere in the dark, moving with precision and unknown intent, the other figure mirrored her determination. Two shadows, facing the same world, carrying burdens unseen, poised to act when the time came. For now, though, there was only vigilance, only quiet, only the steady rhythm of breath, heartbeat, and the faint promise of dawn. Why did the shadow move so deliberately, as if it knew her thoughts before she had even thought them? She tightened her grip on the rifle, every sense alert, every nerve screaming awareness. The ridge beneath her felt both sanctuary and trap, a narrow line between control and chaos. The unknown operative, skilled, precise, and eerily calm, moved like a reflection of herself. And that realization brought an unexpected jolt. Am I facing a threat or a mirror? Her eyes followed the figure, noting every detail. The way the woman crouched low, her movements economical, almost ritualistic. The subtle adjustment of gear, the quiet exhale between each calculated step. Every gesture spoke of training, experience, and a discipline that mirrored her own. Yet the presence was unfamiliar, alien in a way that triggered caution and curiosity at once. She thought of her own path, the countless nights spent in isolation, the hours hunting patience, the the sacrifices she had made to become this person on this ridge. Memories surged of a time before missions, before bullets and decisions that carved themselves into her chest. A quiet home, laughter that seemed like a foreign language now, promises she had made and broken to protect herself and others. Every step she had taken led to this precise moment, confronting an unknown entity with the same skill set and determination she had cultivated over years. The wind shifted, carrying faint scents, dust, iron, smoke from distant fires. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, trained muscles ready, mind calculating probabilities and outcomes. Every instinct screamed, observe first, act second. Yet curiosity gnawed at her. Who was this operative? Friend? Foe? Or something else entirely? She had learned that questions like these could either save or doom a mission. A rustle nearby drew her gaze to the valley below. Civilians scattered, vulnerable, unaware of the shifting danger above. Her chest tightened. The weight of responsibility never left her. Each life she protected, each decision she made in silence etched into her soul, reminding her that strength was not merely physical but moral. She exhaled slowly, centering herself, returning to the mantra that had guided her through countless nights: patience, awareness, action. Her mind flicked back to her mentor, the veteran sniper who had taught her the importance of observation over impulse. See the world not as it is, but as it moves. She repeated the words internally, letting them ground her, reminding her that every movement carried meaning, every hesitation a potential salvation. The unknown operative mirrored that philosophy, moving through shadows and light with careful precision, but the question remained: what was her intent? The sun dipped lower, painting the valley in dusky hues, shadows stretching long and sinister. She adjusted her position, shifting slightly to maintain cover while expanding her field of vision. Her rifle felt like an extension of herself, a conduit for focus, patience, and the quiet determination that had carried her through every mission. A sudden, sharp noise broke the tension, a branch snapping underfoot, almost imperceptible. She froze, breath held, scanning every inch of her surroundings. The operative had paused as well, seemingly sensing the disturbance. The two of them were locked in a silent dance, each aware of the other's presence, each calculating, each waiting for a mistake that might never come. Her thoughts drifted again, dangerous but inevitable. She remembered her first mission alone in hostile territory, young and untested, every decision a gamble. She had been anxious, unsure, her hands trembling slightly as she aimed at a target she couldn't fully identify. But she had survived. She had adapted. She had learned that fear was not weakness, it was clarity in disguise, a signal to focus, to act deliberately. That clarity guided her now, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. The operative made a subtle movement, one that almost betrayed intent. She narrowed her eyes, analyzing. Every detail mattered: the angle of the body, the weight distribution, the rhythm of breathing. Her mind raced through scenarios, probabilities, and outcomes. She knew that any action now would ripple far beyond the immediate ridge. One misstep could expose the squad below, compromise the mission, or worse, claim innocent lives. Minutes stretched into hours, or perhaps only seconds. Time had a way of bending in moments like these. The world seemed distilled to the essentials: breath, sight, silence, awareness. And in that concentrated reality she recognized something profound. Strength was quiet. Resilience was subtle. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act with conscience despite it. The operative shifted again, moving closer to the ridge's edge, yet still maintaining cover. She didn't speak. She didn't signal. She simply observed, a mirror of the patience and precision that defined the woman on the ridge. And in that quiet, a subtle understanding began to form. This was not merely a confrontation. It was a test, a reflection, an opportunity to measure resolve against resolve. Her mind flicked briefly to the squad below, the young soldiers looking to her for guidance, for protection, for the silent assurance that someone was watching over them. She felt pride, tempered with an aching responsibility. Every life under her gaze was a weight she carried silently, shaping each decision, each measured movement. Then unexpectedly the operative made a deliberate signal, small, almost imperceptible. She paused, considering. Was this recognition, communication, or deception? She could not know. She could only observe, analyze, and wait. Patience, she reminded herself. Patience had always been her ally. The sky deepened into twilight, shadows lengthening, the valley transformed into a mosaic of dark shapes and fleeting light. She adjusted her scope one last time, scanning for threats, for patterns, for meaning. And then she saw it. A subtle shift in posture, a momentary lapse in the operative's rhythm. Not enough to act on yet, but enough to confirm that this woman, like her, carried more than skill. She carried humanity, a conscience, a code. Her chest tightened with unspoken understanding. They were both alone in different ways, yet fundamentally the same, shaped by experiences, by choices, by the relentless demand to act when others could not. And in that recognition, a strange sense of calm settled over her. A crackle in the radio interrupted the stillness. "Mark's status." The voice was cautious, strained. She exhaled, steadying herself. Still observing, northern approach secure for now, awaiting further instructions. "Understood, maintain position." She lowered her rifle slightly, letting her shoulders relax just a fraction. Not enough to be careless, never enough to be careless, but enough to acknowledge the weight she carried, the lives she protected, and the quiet victories of restraint. The operative moved again, closer to the ridge, still cautious, still deliberate. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment across the distance, a silent recognition of skill, resolve, and shared purpose. No words passed. None were needed. They were both guardians in their own right, bound by a tacit understanding of what it meant to act with conscience amidst chaos. She thought again of the lessons she had learned over the years: patience, observation, moral responsibility, and the quiet strength of restraint. She had faced death, uncertainty, and fear countless times, yet this moment felt different. It was not about survival alone. It was about understanding, connection, and the unspoken acknowledgement that even in isolation, one was never truly alone if one acted with integrity. The last rays of sunlight faded, leaving the valley cloaked in shadows and muted light. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension in her chest ebb slightly. She was not alone, not entirely, not with the operative mirroring her presence, not with the squad below depending on her vigilance, not with the moral compass that guided every choice she made. And as darkness settled fully over the ridge, she whispered again, softly, almost to herself. Sometimes the storm does not end. Sometimes you simply find your place within it, and your light carves a path through the darkness. She adjusted her rifle once more, eyes scanning, heart steady, mind sharp. The mission was far from over, the unknown operative still present, the threat of the enemy lingering. But in that moment, alone yet not lonely, she understood something fundamental. Resilience was quiet, courage was deliberate, and hope was the act of persistence when the world seemed poised to crush it. And with that understanding, she settled in for the long night. The ridge her solitary watchtower, the operative somewhere in the shadows, and the valley below a world of lives held delicately in the balance. Why did the silence feel heavier tonight than any storm she had faced? The ridge was cloaked in darkness, the valley below a patchwork of shadows and fleeting light. Every movement she made seemed louder than it should, every rustle of her gear magnified in the stillness. Her heart beat steadily, but the tension coiled in her chest like a spring ready to snap. The unknown operative was still out there, somewhere below, moving with careful precision, a mirror of herself in skill and intent. She exhaled, letting the air carry away the tension for a fraction of a second. It was not enough. It never would be enough. She had learned that in moments like these, patience was not passive. It was active, sharp, demanding. Every choice she made, every decision she delayed, shaped outcomes she might not even see. She adjusted her scope again, scanning the valley with methodical care. Her thoughts drifted briefly, dangerously, to the life she had left behind. The small town, the narrow streets, the warmth of home that now seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Her family had never understood why she chose this life, the risks, the endless loneliness, the moral weight she carried in silence. She hadn't understood herself either, not fully, until she realized that this ridge, this responsibility, this storm, was where she belonged. And yet the ache of what she had sacrificed lingered, a quiet hum beneath her vigilance. Movement, a faint shift in the shadows. She froze, finger brushing the trigger lightly. Not yet. Observation first. Awareness always. The operative had made her presence known subtly, deliberately, a shadow that refused to be ignored. She was close now, and for the first time she realized this was not a random encounter. Someone had sent her, or perhaps she had chosen this path by instinct, a convergence of skill and purpose that neither could fully explain. Her mind flicked back to the first mission where she had been truly alone in hostile territory. Young, untested, overwhelmed, she had learned then that fear was clarity in disguise, that instinct, patience, and moral responsibility were inseparable. She had carried that lesson into every mission since. And now, facing this unknown operative, she relied on it again, analyzing movements, anticipating choices, and waiting for the smallest clue. A faint signal on the radio crackled, distorted but human. Marks, situation update. Observing, no advancement from Northern Ridge, awaiting extraction. Understood, maintain position. We're recalculating support. ETA unknown. The word unknown hung heavy. Indefinitely. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. She had survived worse. She would survive this. But she couldn't shake the gnawing thought that tonight, the unknown operative was not just a variable in her mission. She was a mirror, a question, a potential ally or adversary, in ways the mission itself hadn't prepared her for. The operative moved again, cautiously, staying just out of direct sight, using the valley's shadows to conceal herself. She was deliberate, precise, patient, the hallmarks of someone who understood that every action carried consequence. And as she observed, a subtle curiosity sparked in her chest. What drove this person? Was it duty, survival, or something more personal, more human? She didn't know, but she wanted to find out. Her eyes shifted back to the valley below. Civilians, scattered, vulnerable, moving slowly through the night. Her chest tightened at the thought of them, of the responsibility she bore silently. Every life mattered. Every choice mattered. And yet, for all her training and focus, she felt a pang of doubt, a whisper questioning whether she could do enough, protect enough, endure enough. The operative's movement suggested the answer. Vigilance, patience, and action were all that mattered. The woman's silhouette paused, then shifted, almost as if acknowledging her presence. A subtle signal, almost imperceptible, recognition without words, connection without speech. She mirrored the gesture in her mind, understanding it for what it was, a quiet acknowledgement that they were both guardians in this storm, each carrying weight unseen, each bound by choice and conscience. A sudden noise, a rock dislodged by the wind, shattered the delicate balance. Both women froze, shadows poised, muscles tensed. She felt her pulse quicken, not with fear but with heightened awareness. Every instinct screamed to act, to strike, to protect. But restraint was necessary. The lesson of every mission, every night spent alone, every scar earned in silence, echoed in her mind. Do not act without purpose. Observe, calculate, protect. Hours passed like minutes. The night stretched endlessly, a canvas of uncertainty and potential danger. She adjusted her scope repeatedly, scanning for anomalies, patterns, anything that could inform her next move. Her mind ran simulations, probabilities, what-ifs. Every calculation carried moral weight. Every decision held lives in the balance. She exhaled, letting her training anchor her, letting her patience guide her. Then the figure moved closer to the ridge, still cautious, still deliberate. Their eyes met briefly across the shadows, a silent understanding passing between them. No words, no gestures beyond acknowledgement, but in that instant she felt a strange calm. Perhaps the operative was not a threat. Perhaps they were both alone in different ways, yet fundamentally alike, shaped by choices, discipline, and the relentless demand to act when others could not. Her thoughts flicked to the squad below, young, inexperienced, relying on her vigilance. She felt pride, tempered with the ache of responsibility. Every life she protected, every choice she made in silence, was a testament to resilience, courage, and moral clarity. And she realized quietly that the operative was a reminder of the same principles. Skill alone was not enough. Humanity, conscience, and patience were as lethal and necessary as any weapon. A faint glimmer of moonlight illuminated the valley briefly, casting both figures in stark relief against the darkness. Shadows stretched long and threatening, yet there was a symmetry in their presence. Two women, alone, yet bound by shared understanding, poised to act with purpose and precision. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Sometimes, understanding comes not from answers, but from patience, and patience can be the most dangerous weapon of all. The night deepened. The wind carried distant sounds of movement, perhaps enemy patrols, perhaps nothing at all. Every rustle, every whisper of leaves was a signal, a warning, a story waiting to be interpreted. She remained vigilant, every sense tuned, heart steady, mind sharp. The operative mirrored her discipline, maintaining distance but showing skill and intent that could not be ignored. Minutes turned into hours. The valley below remained tense but contained. Civilians moved cautiously, unaware of the shadows that watched over them. And in that stillness she allowed herself a fleeting reflection. She had endured isolation, danger, and moral ambiguity countless times. She had faced death and loss, and yet she persisted. She had carried burdens others would never see, responsibilities no one could understand. And now, in the quiet confrontation with the unknown operative, she felt the same lesson reaffirmed. Strength was quiet, courage deliberate, and hope, the act of persistence, was a choice made in silence. The radio crackled again, faint and distorted. Mark's status. Still observing, northern approach secure, awaiting further instructions. Understood, maintain position. She exhaled, letting the tension ease slightly. Not completely, never completely. The night was far from over. The mission was far from complete. But in that brief pause she understood something vital. Resilience was not loud. Courage was not dramatic. Strength existed in silence, in patience, in moral clarity, in the quiet act of choosing to persist despite uncertainty. And as darkness fully enveloped the ridge, she whispered again, softly, almost to herself. Sometimes the storm does not end. Sometimes you simply find your place within it, and your light carves a path through the darkness. She adjusted her rifle, scanning, calculating, observing. The operative remained in the shadows, distant yet present. The squad below depended on her vigilance. The valley carried the weight of lives she might never meet. And through it all, she understood a profound truth. Hope, resilience, and action, silent, deliberate, moral, were the truest weapons she possessed. Why did the operative suddenly move with such deliberate urgency? She felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. Her heart tightened, the ridge beneath her suddenly both sanctuary and trap. Shadows stretched long across the valley as the operative approached, and with each step, the woman's presence became impossible to ignore. She adjusted her rifle slowly, deliberately, but didn't raise it fully. Not yet. There was a story in the way this operative moved, in the rhythm of her breathing and the cautious precision of each motion. This was not a reckless soldier. This was someone who understood consequence, discipline, and moral responsibility, the hallmarks of someone like herself. And yet the question lingered, ally or adversary? Her mind flicked back to the missions she had endured alone. Every choice she had made, every life she had protected had been guided by patience, observation, and moral clarity. Fear had never dictated her actions. Awareness had. And awareness now told her that this encounter was not accidental. There was a reason this woman was here, and that reason demanded understanding before action. The operative paused at the edge of the ridge, crouched low, and for a fleeting second their eyes met. Recognition flashed in those eyes, not hostility, not fear, but understanding. The silent acknowledgement of two people bound by skill, discipline, and responsibility. She mirrored the gesture mentally, realizing that this could be a rare moment of connection in the midst of chaos. Movement below caught her attention, a patrol approaching, faster than expected. Her chest tightened, anxiety and determination mixing into a focused resolve. The operative had noticed as well, shifting subtly, mirroring her vigilance. In that moment she understood something fundamental. This was no longer about solitary action. This was about coordination, intuition, and the silent trust that sometimes must be given before it can be earned. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her own squad, young, inexperienced, depending on her vigilance. The weight of responsibility settled heavier on her shoulders. She had always carried it silently, but now, facing another trained operative, she realized that burden could be shared, that trust, even tentative, unspoken trust, was not weakness. It was survival. A distant rustle confirmed her fears. The enemy was moving, approaching the northern ridge faster than intelligence had predicted. The operative glanced at her, subtle but deliberate, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. Coordination without words, shared understanding, and then action became inevitable. She adjusted her scope, counting targets, calculating trajectories, and timing the wind. Every decision was weighted, precise, deliberate. The operative mirrored her, choosing positions that complemented hers rather than competed. The ridge became a theater of silent strategy, each movement measured, each decision calculated, each breath deliberate. Minutes stretched into eternity. Every heartbeat counted. The operative moved closer, but not threateningly, deliberately, intentionally, with skill and restraint. She felt a flicker of connection, a recognition that this woman, though unknown, shared her principles. Protect life when possible, act decisively when necessary, and always carry moral responsibility alongside skill. A sudden cry split the night air. A civilian caught between shadows and patrol. Her pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady. Every instinct screamed to act. She adjusted her rifle, lined up her shot, and exhaled slowly. The operative mirrored her action, covering another approach simultaneously. Together, in a harmony born of skill and shared purpose, they neutralized the immediate threat without harm to the civilians below. Relief washed over her, brief but potent. She realized quietly that this was the first time she had felt not entirely alone in a long mission. The operative wasn't a friend yet, perhaps not even an ally fully, but the shared action created a bond forged in understanding, in skill, and in unspoken moral alignment. Her thoughts drifted to the past, the sacrifices, the choices, the nights spent alone on ridges like this, carrying the weight of unseen lives. She had always believed that strength was solitary, that endurance was an individual trial. And yet, in this moment, she recognized a profound truth. Sometimes resilience was strongest when mirrored in another. Sometimes courage was amplified when shared. The enemy was regrouping, slower now, cautious after the earlier intervention. She observed, noting every shift, every movement, every subtle clue in their behavior. The operative moved again, signaling subtly with a hand, guiding her attention to a pattern she hadn't noticed, a potential vulnerability, a gap in coverage. She nodded silently, adjusting her focus, feeling the rare comfort of shared observation. Night deepened further, the valley cloaked in near-total darkness. Stars flickered above, distant, cold, indifferent. Yet down here on this ridge, the stakes were immediate, visceral, human. She felt the weight of every choice pressing against her chest, the weight of survival, protection, morality, and consequence. And in that weight she found clarity. The operative finally spoke, quietly, almost a whisper, "You're good." She froze, surprised, then allowed a small exhale. Not a smile, not acknowledgement, just recognition that words sometimes mattered less than understanding. She didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. Action would speak louder than any statement could. And indeed, action was exactly what was required. The northern ridge shifted once more. Patrols moved cautiously, seeking to probe, to test, to challenge. She and the operative coordinated silently, every movement, every breath, every shot calculated. They acted with precision, neutralizing threats without unnecessary risk, protecting civilians, securing the ridge. Every decision, every maneuver reflected not just skill but moral clarity. For a fleeting moment, exhaustion washed over her. She had been vigilant for hours, enduring both physical and emotional strain. The operative noticed, subtly offering a small gesture, an acknowledgement of shared burden, silent encouragement. She allowed herself a brief moment of relief, understanding that connection, even minimal, could fortify resilience. Her thoughts wandered again, dangerous but inevitable. She remembered her first mentor, her first real test, and the moments that had defined her early career. Each memory was a building block of the person she had become, resilient, vigilant, patient, morally aligned, skilled. And now, confronting an unknown but morally aligned operative, she saw that the past, present, and future converged here. Experience informed action. Ethics guided decisions. Skill amplified intention. Hours passed. The night remained tense but contained. Civilians moved cautiously, the patrols had retreated, and the ridge remained under control. She lowered her rifle slightly, letting muscles relax just enough to exhale without compromising readiness. The operative moved closer, a silent acknowledgement of presence, not intrusion. For the first time that night, she felt the subtle warmth of companionship in a world defined by danger and isolation. Her thoughts drifted inward, quietly reflective. I am not alone. Not entirely. Not in skill. Not in purpose. Not in moral responsibility. She had always believed in solitary strength, but the operative had shown her another truth. Sometimes endurance is fortified when shared. Sometimes courage is reinforced when mirrored. As dawn began to break, painting the valley with muted gold and soft purples, she realized that the night had passed without catastrophe, not through luck, but through vigilance, moral clarity, and unspoken coordination. She had survived. They had survived. And in that survival, she found a rare sense of quiet hope. She adjusted her rifle one last time, scanning the horizon, aware that the mission was far from over. The operative remained nearby, still silent, still precise, a partner in vigilance even if only temporarily. And as the first light of day touched the ridge, she whispered softly, almost to herself. Sometimes survival is not about acting alone. Sometimes it is about sharing the burden silently and finding strength in unexpected mirrors. Her eyes swept the valley once more. The enemy's presence was minimal, civilians were safe for now, and the ridge remained secure. The operative's presence was a reminder that skill and morality could coexist, that patience and action could align, and that even in isolation, connection, however brief, was possible. She lowered her rifle finally, allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. The storm was not over. The mission was not complete. But she understood now that hope, resilience, and courage could be shared, mirrored, and amplified, even in silence, even in shadows, even in the most dangerous of ridges. And as the valley slowly came alive with the first signs of morning, she whispered again, softly, to the wind, to herself, to the world. Sometimes, light is carved not through force, but through quiet vigilance, shared strength, and the moral courage to persist when the storm seems endless. Why did the first shot feel heavier than any she had ever fired? The sun had just risen, washing the valley in harsh light that revealed every shadow, every ridge, every movement. She crouched low, rifle steady, eyes scanning, but this morning felt different. The enemy was no longer distant, no longer abstract. They were real, moving fast, precise, and deadly. And with them the unknown operative remained close, watching, calculating, a mirror of her own skill, yet still a question she could not fully answer. She exhaled slowly, steadying her hands. Hours of vigilance, patience, and preparation had led to this moment. Every movement mattered. Every breath carried consequence. And yet beneath the calm, anxiety surged, a pulse of adrenaline reminding her that skill alone was never enough. Awareness, experience, and moral clarity had to guide her actions, and so far they had. The operative shifted beside her, silent but unmistakably present. For a brief moment their eyes met, acknowledging the tension, the stakes, the fragile alignment of purpose. She nodded slightly, imperceptible to anyone else but clear in meaning. We act together but independently. We protect life. We neutralize threat. We survive. Then the first shots rang out distant, sharp, a warning. The enemy had advanced faster than intelligence predicted. Civilians were still scattered below, moving cautiously, unaware of the danger creeping closer. Her chest tightened, anxiety mixing with resolve. She lifted her rifle, taking careful aim, knowing that every bullet carried weight far beyond her comprehension. Her mind flicked back to missions past, moments of fear, moments of clarity, moments when moral responsibility had guided her decisions more than orders ever could. She remembered her first time under fire, the terror and hesitation, and how patience had saved her life. That lesson anchored her now. Observation first, action second, precision always. The operative mirrored her movements flawlessly, covering a different approach, anticipating threats she had not even seen. Together, they formed a silent web of vigilance, threading every ridge, shadow, and angle with awareness and intent. There was no room for doubt. Every heartbeat mattered. Every rustle, every flash, every breath could be a signal, a warning, or a death sentence. Suddenly, a civilian screamed. A woman cornered, dragging her child, caught between the advancing enemy and a crumbling fence. The instinct to act surged through her, muscles tensing, mind racing. She adjusted her scope, calculating wind, distance, and trajectory. But then she glanced at the operative, who had already taken position to cover another angle. A silent agreement passed between them. Act decisively, protect without recklessness. Her shot was precise. Enemy threat neutralized. The mother and child stumbled, unharmed, moving to safety. Relief and tension collided in her chest. The operative mirrored the precision, taking down another threat silently. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary. Action had spoken for them both. The enemy regrouped, cautious now but still advancing. Her heart tightened. Every decision carried weight, not just her life, but lives under her watch, and now shared responsibility with the operative. She had trained for this, endured for this, yet the moral gravity of each choice pressed heavier than any physical load she had ever carried. She remembered her squad below, young soldiers looking to her for guidance, for protection, for the unspoken assurance that someone was watching. She felt pride tempered with responsibility, the same pride that had carried her through isolation, through nights spent alone on ridges like this. And now, mirrored in the operative, she recognized that resilience could be shared, courage amplified, hope reinforced. Suddenly, an enemy soldier broke from cover, moving toward the civilians. Her rifle fired instinctively, guided by training, experience, and moral clarity. Another threat neutralized, yet the cost weighed heavily, not in blood spilled, but in the awareness of lives forever touched by these decisions. The operative was close, covering another approach, her presence both reassuring and unnerving. Together, they formed a silent partnership, a blend of skill, conscience, and moral precision. Hours stretched, movement relentless. The valley had become a theater of quiet strategy, shadows, and sudden bursts of violence. She moved with purpose, covering approaches, guiding civilians, neutralizing threats with calm precision. The operative mirrored every action, providing a sense of balance she had not realized she craved. Trust, tentative but present, began to form in the crucible of shared danger. Her mind flicked to memories she had kept buried, the family she had left behind, the life she had chosen over comfort, over certainty, over safety. She remembered her first mentor, the lessons about patience, observation, moral responsibility. Those lessons were alive now, guiding each decision, each movement, each deliberate breath. Fear had not dictated her actions. Awareness had, and awareness was sharpened when mirrored in another skilled, morally aligned operative. The enemy pressed forward, relentless. Civilians moved cautiously, the squad below depended on vigilance. Every movement she made was a calculation of ethics, skill, and consequence. The operative's presence reinforced the delicate balance of survival, trust, and moral responsibility. They were two solitary forces converging, acting in harmony born not of friendship, but of shared understanding and mirrored purpose. A sharp exhale escaped her lips as she observed another threat, a sniper hidden across the ridge, aiming at her position. She signaled subtly to the operative, who adjusted position to cover a blind angle. Together, they neutralized the sniper with careful precision, ensuring civilians remained safe. Relief collided with tension. They had survived another wave, but the storm was far from over. Her chest tightened, exhaustion mingling with adrenaline. She had been vigilant for hours, enduring both physical and emotional strain. Yet in the operative's silent presence, she felt a strange comfort, a recognition that strength and resilience could exist in shared vigilance. She allowed herself a fleeting moment of relief, knowing that trust, even tentative and unspoken, could fortify determination and courage. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley, revealing every shadow, every ridge, every potential threat. She adjusted her scope, scanning for anomalies, patterns, and vulnerabilities. The operative remained close, silent, precise, a mirror and a question simultaneously. Her chest tightened again, anxiety mingling with the rare warmth of connection in a world defined by danger and isolation. She remembered her squad, young soldiers depending on her, looking for guidance, protection, reassurance. Pride mingled with responsibility, grounding her, reminding her why she endured so much. Every life she protected, every choice she made, was a testament to silent courage, moral clarity, and the quiet power of deliberate action. And the operative, by mirroring her skill and conscience, became a symbol of that same principle. Resilience is strongest when shared, courage is amplified when reflected, hope persists when mirrored in others. The valley remained tense, the enemy cautious but relentless. Civilians moved carefully, shadows shifting, danger looming. She lowered her rifle briefly, allowing muscles to relax just enough to exhale without compromising vigilance. The operative mirrored her relaxation subtly, acknowledging shared endurance, silent support, and mirrored skill. Her thoughts drifted inward, reflective and dangerous. She remembered the nights spent alone, the weight of decisions, the moral gravity of every choice. She had endured isolation, danger, and ethical ambiguity countless times. Yet now, mirrored in the operative, she realized a profound truth. Sometimes resilience is shared, courage amplified, and hope strengthened, not through words or friendship, but through the quiet alignment of skill, morality, and purpose. A distant rumble in the valley signaled yet another wave, another test of vigilance. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her rifle. The operative shifted, mirroring her movements, a subtle nod of understanding passing between them. No words were needed. Their actions spoke for them both. Precision, patience, moral responsibility, these were the tools of survival, the weapons of choice, the essence of resilience. The sun rose fully, casting the valley in sharp light. Shadows retreated, but danger persisted. She scanned relentlessly, guiding civilians, covering approaches, neutralizing threats with deliberate care. The operative remained at her side, silent, precise, a mirror of her skill and conscience. And in that alignment she found a rare clarity. Hope is an act, courage a choice, and resilience is strongest when shared, even in silence, even in shadows, even on the edge of impossible odds. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Sometimes, survival is not about acting alone. Sometimes, it is about shared vigilance, mirrored skill, and moral courage carried silently in the storm. The ridge remained under their watch. Civilians moved cautiously. Enemy presence was contained but persistent. The operative stayed close, silent, deliberate, a mirror, a question, and a rare companion in shared purpose. And as the valley slowly came alive with the signs of morning, she understood the truth she had always carried. Light is carved not through force alone, but through vigilance, patience, moral clarity, and the courage to persist even when the storm seems endless. Why did the quiet before dawn feel like it could shatter at any moment? The ridge was still, the valley below caught between shadows and the first pale rays of sunlight. After hours of relentless vigilance, the enemy was contained but not defeated. Civilians had moved to safety, the squad was in position, and yet the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than ever on her shoulders. She adjusted her rifle, scanning, listening, feeling the tension pulse through every nerve. The operative moved beside her, silent, deliberate, a mirror of patience and skill. For hours they had acted in tandem, unspoken communication flowing like a river beneath the chaos. And yet questions remained. Who was she really? Why had she appeared at this precise time in this precise place? Ally, stranger, reflection of herself. There was no room to answer these questions now. Action demanded attention, vigilance, moral clarity. She exhaled slowly, feeling the ache in her chest, the fatigue in her muscles. The night had been long, full of tension, of precise action, of life-and-death decisions executed with calm and care. Every choice had carried consequences beyond her immediate vision. Yet in the operative's presence, she had glimpsed something rare. Shared strength, mirrored courage, a subtle hope that endurance could exist in tandem with another. Then it happened, a sudden shift in the valley below. Enemy forces, smaller in number but aggressive, advanced unexpectedly, testing her patience, her calculations, her moral resolve. She crouched low, pulse steady, mind sharp, her rifle aligned. Action became inevitable. The operative mirrored her movements, sliding into position to cover a blind angle. Together, they formed a silent web of vigilance, threading every ridge, shadow, and possible threat with precision. Every movement, every breath, every glance carried weight. The balance between restraint and decisive action had to be perfect. Misstep could mean casualties, compromise, or death. She thought of her squad, young soldiers depending on her guidance, her moral compass, her vigilance. Pride mingled with anxiety. She had carried responsibility alone countless times, but now, shared silently, it felt different, less lonely, more formidable, more human. She realized that survival, courage, and resilience could be amplified, even mirrored, in another who understood purpose, skill, and conscience. The enemy advanced into exposed terrain. Her first shot rang out, precise, deliberate, neutralizing a threat without collateral damage. The operative responded simultaneously, another threat eliminated, civilians safe. They did not speak. Words were unnecessary. Action, observation, moral responsibility, their shared language. Hours seemed to compress into moments. Each wave of enemy action demanded focus, strategy, and moral clarity. She adjusted her scope repeatedly, calculating trajectories, wind, distance, probabilities. The operative mirrored each adjustment, anticipating threats she had not seen, covering vulnerabilities, providing a silent but essential alignment of skill and conscience. Her mind drifted briefly to her past, dangerous but grounding. Childhood memories of safety and warmth, sacrifice to pursue a life defined by vigilance and moral responsibility. First missions alone, where fear had been clarified into purpose. Lessons from mentors who had taught that patience, awareness, and conscience were as lethal as any weapon. Those memories guided her now, grounding each shot, each decision, each heartbeat. The enemy faltered under coordinated pressure. Civilians moved safely. The squad remained intact. But she knew the battle was not yet over. Vigilance, moral clarity, and patience had protected lives so far, but she understood the stakes fully. The mission was far from finished, and every choice carried weight she could not ignore. The operative shifted beside her, close enough for awareness, distant enough for autonomy. For hours, the silent partnership had become a mirror of resilience, courage, and purpose. She felt a subtle connection, a recognition that strength need not be solitary, that shared vigilance could create hope in the midst of relentless chaos. Suddenly, a distant scream, civilian trapped near enemy movement. Adrenaline surged. Action was unavoidable. She adjusted her aim, calculating trajectory and wind. The operative shifted to cover another approach. Together, with synchronized precision, they neutralized threats, ensured civilians escaped harm, and reinforced the fragile balance of control. Exhaustion weighed on her. Every hour, every decision, every heartbeat had drained energy, yet moral clarity and vigilance remained unwavering. She realized that resilience was not endurance alone. It was the conscious choice to persist, to act deliberately, to carry responsibility even when invisible, even when unacknowledged. The operative's mirrored presence reinforced that truth. Sunlight finally bathed the valley fully. Shadows receded, threats became clearer, and the ridge remained secure. She scanned for anomalies, remaining alert, yet allowing herself a brief moment to breathe. The operative moved slightly closer, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared endurance, mirrored skill, and silent understanding. Trust, tentative but present, had grown not through words but through action, precision, and alignment of moral intent. Her thoughts turned inward, reflective and profound. She remembered those she had lost along the way, the nights spent alone in ridges like this, the moral decisions etched into her conscience. She understood now that courage, resilience, and hope were not solitary acts. They could be shared, mirrored, amplified. Even in silence, even in shadows, even under relentless danger, connection could exist, and in that connection, strength and clarity could flourish. The final wave of enemy forces faltered, overwhelmed by strategic precision and shared vigilance. Civilians moved to safety. The squad below regrouped, intact. She lowered her rifle, muscles aching, pulse steady. The operative stood nearby, silent, deliberate, a reflection of her own skill and conscience. For the first time that mission, she felt a rare, profound clarity. Strength, courage, and hope were most powerful when shared, even in fleeting, unspoken ways. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease. The storm had not ended, but the worst had passed. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Sometimes survival is not about acting alone. Sometimes it is about shared vigilance, mirrored strength, and moral courage carried silently through the storm." Her eyes swept the valley. Sunlight glinted off distant ridges. Shadows retreated. The operative gave a subtle nod, acknowledgement, respect, perhaps gratitude. No words were spoken, none were needed. The ridge, the valley, the squad, and the civilians bore witness to the silent partnership, the moral courage, and the deliberate action that had protected life. In that quiet, reflective moment, she allowed herself to remember fully. Family, mentors, losses, sacrifices, all the moments that had shaped her. She understood the truth of her journey. Resilience, courage, and hope were not heroic explosions or dramatic gestures. They were quiet, deliberate, moral, anchored in skill, conscience, and the unspoken understanding that sometimes dignity does not speak, it simply acts. She lowered her rifle finally, shoulders easing, chest unburdening slightly. The operative remained nearby, but distance allowed space for reflection. She glanced at the horizon, feeling the subtle warmth of the sun, the hope embedded in persistence, the moral clarity forged in action. And in that final, lingering moment, the ridge still, the valley slowly waking, the operative silent but present, she realized the profound, simple truth that had carried her through the storm. Light is carved not through force alone, but through vigilance, moral courage, and the quiet determination to act when the world is poised to crush hope. She exhaled fully, the ridge emptying of tension, the valley secure, the storm passing not with a roar but with the quiet, deliberate act of resilience, mirrored in another who understood, in shadows and silence, the true meaning of strength. And as the sun climbed higher, illuminating the valley in gold and purple, she whispered one last time, softly, to the wind, to the operative, to herself. Sometimes the storm does not end. Sometimes you simply find your place within it, and your light carves a path through the darkness. Silence followed. The ridge, the valley, the operative, and the squad below held it. A quiet conclusion, reflective, morally resonant, cinematic. The story lingered not in explosions or heroics, but in endurance, mirrored strength, and the quiet act of hope prevailing against darkness.